Hey guys, as you know, we were recently at FanX, Salt Lake City Comic Con, and we got to see a lot of amazing panels, talk to a lot of great people, as you know, and this episode is just going to be the live panels that we attended. I got to ask questions to Kevin Smith, Vincent D'Onofrio, Jason Mewes, and we also have the Clarks panel along with the Cobra Kai panel. So hope you enjoy this episode. As always, check us out on Hops Geek News on all social media sites, Hops News on every favorite podcasting platform, patreon.com/hopsnews, and I hope you enjoy.
Rolling fatties, smoking blunts. Who smokes the blunts? We smoke the blunts. Rolling blunts and $15, little man. Put that shit in my hand. If that money doesn't show, then you owe me, oh. Ooh yeah. But try to ask Kevin about how it happened, right? But I believe I'm right about the agents just being like, hey, get man.
What's up, man? I'm Matt.
Matt, give it up for Matt. Woo! Matt. Sorry, let me ask, I have a question. Who's in here after me?
Jerry Elvis.
Sorry, too many people answered. One person.
Jerry Elvis.
Thank you. I was only wondering because I'm seeing it starting to fill up a lot. I was like, this can't all be for me. When I'm ending. Yeah, sorry, I asked you.
You're good. So clearly there's not much that you won't do. However, was at any point when Kevin was like, Jay, I need you to do this, that you were like, Kevin, what the hell is the matter with you? I'm not doing that.
Good question. Because I was going to answer this sort of earlier when the gentleman asked about the tuck. So when we were in Zack and Miri, and when I got to, I read the whole script, right? And when we got to the one scene in Zack and Miri, and I don't know, people haven't seen Zack and Miri, there's a scene where Seth Rogen's character is like pouring his heart out to his lady. She's sitting in there crying and stuff, and I'm in the bedroom. So in the script it says Lester comes walking out and he's butt naked, right? And he just walks out naked, walks past Seth, his character, and says, "What's up?" And I'm like, all right. And I just assumed, like in most movies, when they shoot a scene like that, like either someone's carrying a surfboard, right, or they walk by like some fucking plants and stuff, and you see that, there's a fucking table with fruit baskets and shit, and they just happen to be lined up, not on purpose, but it just happens to block it. So I assumed I was gonna be walking by, and maybe I walked by, and it was only from the head waist up, or if they got lower, it'd be me walking past the table. And I remember it was like probably the night before. I didn't even think about that scene really. I was just thinking, I always make sure, like when I know that I usually think about what's going to be the next day. All right, I'm in this scene. Oh my gosh, I have a lot of dialogue for these two scenes. This scene, there's not a lot of dialogue, so on set I'll remember those two lines, But this is like a monologue, so let me go through this and I'll try to memorize it that night and stuff. So I didn't even think about that scene until it got too close. And so I remember the night before, I go, Kev, man, it was maybe 2 days before even. I go, that scene's coming up right here. And I said, I hadn't asked you before, it's been a few weeks, what is the plan? Like, am I going to come out and there's going to be a table with a fucking watermelon on it, a big plant? Like, what's the gag? What's the funny gag? And he's like, you know what? I've been thinking about it. And I think you just come out and you're going to be butt naked, wiener swinging and shit. I was like, no way, bro. He's like, yeah, dude, I'm serious. I was like, you're kidding, right? I'm like, for real though, what are we going to use? I want to know. Is it going to be funny or what? He's like, dude, no, I'm serious. There's a bunch of movies. I can't remember what movies came out. There's at least 2 movies that had came out that year, and a couple dudes showed their wiener, and it sort of went over okay, right? Like, I guess it was like, no one was like, holy shit, the movie was great, but there was a offensive wiener flying around or anything. So Kevin's like, I think it'll work, man. I think it'll be funny and stuff. So I'm like, all right, man, I don't know. And then I was like, I don't know if I can do it. He's like, well, why not? And I was like, look, my niece, well, it's really my cousin, as long as, I have one of those nieces that are really my blood cousin, but her mom raised me, blah, blah, blah. So I was like, she brings her kids, and her kids are at that age was 9 and like 7. Even though they probably shouldn't be seeing and hearing the other things, I ain't gonna tell her how to raise her kids. But it's like, if they want to hear cuss words and shit, that's fine if she lets it. But I was like, they're gonna see my wiener. Not to mention, my wife at the time was pretty new. We've just been together like 3 years, and her mother-in-law was coming. My mother-in-law was coming. Her godmother, who I've gotten close with, like her family's coming, and a couple of her girlfriends. So I'm like, her girlfriends are gonna see my wiener. My mother-in-law's gonna see my wiener. I was like, man, I don't know if I can do this, bro. He's like, come on, dude, it'll be fine. And I was like, I don't know. I was like, well, can you do me this? So we did one take. All I asked him is, I said, let me do one take where I come out and I'm like scratching and covering it up, right? So I was like, I want to make sure we have that, because I don't want it to just be because you want to see my wiener, Kevin, right? And want to see if I'll do it. In my head, I felt like he was doing it just to be like, I just want to see if you'll do it. You know what I mean? And it's not going to work with it. And people are going to be like, oh God, why? I said, but if it works, like if it comes out and I'm like, oh shit, then like perfect timing, it's funny, there's wieners and balls flying around, then fine, you know, we're good to go. So he let me do one scene with that. But again, I was very hesitant, didn't want to do it. We talked about it. I remember calling my wife up and saying, well, what do you think? Are you okay with your friends seeing my wiener and how luscious and beautiful it is? Next time I look at it, they're all going to be staring at me and shit, you know? And she's like, none of my friends are going to go, well, see your fucking movie. I was like, fair enough, fair enough. So it was, I really was hesitant. And I did do a scene where I covered it. And then we did a scene where I'm just walking and chilling, right? But when we watched the edited pieces together, it was perfect, because it is where it's a like serious moment where Seth Rogen's like, man, I'm sorry, I want you back, baby. And he's pouring his heart out, pouring her heart out. And it's a serious moment. And then I come walking by like, what's up, bro? And my wiener's just flying around a little bit and shit. But my favorite part is what I came up with in that scene is after I walk by and I do that, I go to the refrigerator and I think he asks her, like, is he naked? And, you know, is Lester naked or whatever? And she's like, I don't know, he slipped over. And he looks over at me in the fridge and I'm drinking orange juice. So Kevin just told me to drink the orange juice and that's it, right? And then the camera like goes from Seth over to me and it's supposed to be my butt and that's it, right? So while he's like, all right, camera, like he would be like, there's cameras on you now. So as he did that on purpose, I dropped the orange juice can and I went, oops, and I picked it up, right? And you could see the silhouette of my ball bag just hanging, right? And I hear Kevin start cracking up and shit. And he goes, cut. And he has to cut because he laughed on the scene. But also because he's like, yo, he tells the grips, he's like, is there a DP too? He's like, is there any way you could put like a light in there? Because we could sort of see the shadow of the silhouette, but not enough. It's almost too dark. He's like, put a light in there so the light shines through and we could just see a nice silhouette of Jay's ball bag and shit, right? And so he went in, set up a light and shit, and we did it again. And this time it was like perfect. I dropped the cat and you could just see it and stuff. So I got to throw in, and then, you know what? That answers my ad-lib. Are you still here? My best ad-lib ever was when I dropped the cap and showed my ball bag. Let's go. Thank you, thank you.
It out, and then it became part of the script, and then you would have to repeat it. But Lee was constantly improvising, so he was constantly digging himself a grave because he would come up with so much stuff, and he wasn't like a incredibly trained actor, though he was a very good actor when the camera was rolling, but he didn't have a lot of training. You know, he was more of a military guy. But he would accumulate so much dialogue for himself, and it would just make it harder and harder for him all day long.
Because memorizing lines is not easy for a lot of people who are even professionals who do it their whole lives and are trained.
Yeah.
So I'm going to get one more question, and I'm going to unleash heck, because it's Utah.
Okay.
So I have said this to a lot of people in public, and I will say this to my dying day. One of the greatest physical acting moments I've ever witnessed is you as Edgar in Men in Black.
Thanks very much.
It's the balance of, it is super funny, but it's also unbelievably believable, if I can say that, because I've actually felt like you were a bug trying on a human suit.
Yeah.
My only worry was, did you hurt yourself doing that? Because that looked like you might have double jointed yourself in the inappropriate way.
No, I didn't hurt myself, but I can tell you a really good story about that if you want to hear it.
That's exactly why I asked.
So, a friend of mine who used to run Danny DeVito's company a long time ago, her name was Stacy Scher. She was a producer, and I happened to do Keanu Reeves and I did a movie called Feeling Minnesota, where we played brothers, and Stacy produced that. And so we became friends, and I was in LA doing another film at the time. I'm a New Yorker, I live in New York, but back in the day they used to actually make films in Los Angeles, and so you'd stay for like 3 or 4 films in a row, and you'd end up, each studio would end up paying your rent on your house, and you'd just stay in this house for like a year straight.
Cha-ching!
Yeah, and so Stacy called me one day and she said, there's this director, Barry Sonnenfeld, and I knew who he was because I had just gone to the screening of Get Shorty, which is a great film if you've never seen it. And I said, yeah, of course. And she goes, well, he wants me to give you a script, but there's one condition. You have to promise that you'll never talk about acting or direction or anything with him. And, you know, because I had worked with Stanley Kubrick, he was a lot like that himself. It's always a kind of worry because you have nobody to go to. But, you know, I was used to it. So I said, okay, I'll promise I won't talk to him about acting. And so she delivered the script to me. She had the script delivered to me. And so I open it up and I start reading it, and it's this creature that comes down and takes over this guy's body, and there's practically no dialogue and no description of the character. Nothing that you see in the movie was in the script. It was all in Barry's mind. And so I kind of like, and I can't talk to the director. Like I had, and we were hanging. He was actually living with me at the time, and he said, "Well, it's Barry Sonnenfeld," and we had known about his cinematography and everything he had done with previous people like Raimi and Coen Brothers and stuff. And he goes, "You got to do it," and I'm like, "Oh man, like what am I getting myself into?" I said, "Okay." So I said, "Okay," and then I had to figure it out, and so. I remember smoking a joint with my friend Steve back in the day.
As you do.
And
it's prep work.
Yeah. And we were watching bug documentaries. And I remember sitting on this couch, which was a stoner couch, I have to admit. Back then, that's what we did. And if those days were only still around, it would be so much more fun. But those days are gone. So we would watch, and I remember we were watching documentary after documentary after documentary, and the last thing I remember is that there was a slow zoom in on a beetle walking across a wooden porch. And it kind of pushed in and then panned with the beetle in this kind of slow, and I just got up and I turned it off and I just said, fuck it, I can't do this, I can't do this. It's ridiculous. I wasn't learning anything. It didn't help at all. And so I went for a walk that same day, and I was walking on Santa Monica Boulevard, and I passed by a store that sold prosthetics and medical equipment for limbs and things like that. And I saw these braces, these knee braces. And I went in and I asked the guy, can I try one on? And he's like, absolutely. It was this old dude. He was probably about 70 years old. And he said, yeah, come on. And I explained what it was for, and he got so excited. The store was empty, and it was just him and I. And so we tried these things on, and he put them on my knees. And I said, is there any way we can lock them off? And he said, oh, yeah. So he went to his back room and he got some duct tape, and he had paint stirrers, wooden paint, right? And he brought a bunch of those out, and I bent my knees like that, and we locked them off with the paint stirrers and the tape. We locked my ankles off and my knees, and then I just tried to walk. And I thought, oh, this is getting somewhere now. Like there's a creature stuck in this guy's body. It must be very difficult for him to move, and he must be very frustrated about it. And that's how it led to that character, the movement, the way I came up with the movements of the character and stuff. And then I knew I had to find a voice, and we were watching Chinatown. I used to have a great big screen with laser. I still have like 2,000 laser discs. And
so laser discs are like compact. Wait a minute.
They're the size of an album.
Well, we got to tell them what albums are. These are kids nowadays.
Yeah.
So albums were these plastic vinyl things that you would put in you just took a stick that was sharp thing would run around.
Yeah.
Music.
It was this big silver disc, like a giant CD, if you even know what a CD is.
That's that.
But so we were watching Chinatown, and there was this great director who was an actor in this film called John Huston, and I took his voice and started to play with what little dialogue there was in the script, and there was this one particular line, pond scum, and I did it like John Huston, pond scum, like that, because that's how John Huston talks. He accentuated everything he said. And his inflection was always the same, like that. And so that seemed to work to me. The only thing was that it was too slow a cadence for comedy, because comedy has to be a bit faster, and you have to be able to control the beats in comedy, and you can't screw up the timing of anybody else. So to do a languid thing, it would have to be written that way, and this wasn't. So I used George C. Scott's performance in Dr. Strangelove, where he talked like this, very fast, like that. So I combined the two voices, and that's how I came up with the voice for the character in Men in Black. Yeah. And then that's not the end of the story, though. And so then I showed up on set, and I remember Barry didn't know what I was going to do. He'd never seen me do the character at all. And the first scene was the scene, I believe it was in a barn, where I cross through the barn and I kill an orchid man or something like that. And as I'm crossing, we're doing a take, and as I'm crossing, I hear Barry say, "Cut." And I'm like, oh, well, there was probably something technical wrong or something like that. No. He then told the first AD to clear the set and for me to stay. Because that's exactly what went through my mind.
Yes, somebody's in
Exactly
trouble.
what that sound, yeah. Exactly that sound went through my mind. And all the blood, So I said, okay, all right, I'm getting fired. I've never been fired before, I'm getting fired. And he goes to me, first of all, Barry Sonnenfeld is such a sweet man. He goes, he talks like this. He goes, are you gonna do that the whole time? And I'm like, yeah, Barry, that's the extent of my talent. And he said, long story short, actually, he said, well, it's either going to be the most horrible thing ever, or it's going to be great. So let's just keep going.
And it was absolutely great. It was fantastic. I loved it. So, no one else wants to hear from me. Even my wife is like, get to it. So, we're going to start off with your nemesis. A well-dressed, I want to say Matt Murdock, but you look like a very dreamy Charlie Cox.
Thank you.
What's your question?
Okay, my question is, how was it for you to go from playing Wilson Fisk on Netflix to then playing Wilson Fisk on a Disney Plus show?
It's a good question because, there's always this looming question about canon and what fits where and how does it fit. And, to tell you the truth, you guys probably know more than I know about canon. I just know what my sons fill me in on. But the only answer that I have for that is that I'm always playing the character the way that I want to play him. Like, nobody comes to me and says to me, you need to play him this way for that or this way for that. Like, they don't do that at Marvel. You create the character and they let you fly with it. And they love it. You know, they love that you have the enthusiasm, that we, the actors, have the enthusiasm we have, which, by the way, our enthusiasm is fed by all of you. And so, well, it's, you know, in this particular case, when it comes to these characters, there is no other greater enthusiasm than the fans. And we feel it, I have to tell you. And it doesn't scare us. It doesn't scare me. It makes me rise to the occasion. And so it's appreciated. But so I'm always playing him the way that I want to. And how that performance fits into each different show, that's not up to me. And, you know, that I just feel like Wilson Fisk is an emotionally based character. He is a mess, a hot mess. And at his worst, he's a cold-blooded killer. And at his best, he's, I think, awesome.
Thank you. Next.
Hey, my question is just, you disappear in any role you're in. So what method, is there anything that really you found that works for you to really just meld and disappear in these roles, such as Edgar, Wilson Fisk, and things like that?
Well, I don't want to I don't know if you guys are into actors talking about acting. It's kind of, can be boring sometimes. Without getting too actor-y, mushy, I'll just say that my training is in many types of acting. American Stanislavski, the theater I studied with, I toured with them for 3.5 years, and then I started, after that I learned method acting. So I use a combination of a couple of different systems of acting, and that's my main go-to, those things. But basically, for me, which I think most actors do, especially the actors that are more grounded kind of people, my job is to service the story. So the better the script, the better I am, you know? And so that's really it. I just approach it from the story, and I let the writers, without ever speaking to them, I let their writing just give me ideas. And I've just learned over the years through training and taking a lot of chances in my previous work to put a character together that hopefully everybody's going to like. I mean, really, to explain anything more would be an acting class.
Just a quick follow-up on that. I know some actors are
When we got the scripts, the third one especially, and reading it, you know, we're older people, we're older characters, and Kevin has grown as a writer. He's really done incredibly well with everything he's done in the progression. If you see his very first movie to his very last movie, and you see just the emotional thread of where it all goes through, it's a testament to us just growing and wanting to connect on a certain level.
Yeah, it's a testament to Kevin's writing. Like you read the script and it's kind of all there. It doesn't take. It's not hard to sort of get into character. I just got to chew gum. That's it.
Turn the hat backwards. There you go. It's like his Clark Kent. No one knows who he is.
There was a different version of Clerks 3 written, and you know it's been talked about already. I'm not saying anything that hasn't been said already. It was just a very dark script. It didn't feel like it belonged in the Clerks world. It just was kind of an odd thing. I know Kevin has since done live readings of it, and he is very glad that movie didn't get made. As far as like why I decided to do it, I don't know. It's like when Kevin pitched the idea for the script that we wound up shooting, he was just so excited about it, and his excitement was kind of infectious. So I said, "Yeah, I'll do it." John, I mean, he's like 47. He would go in the restroom, climb out the window, and get rid of that poor girl. It had to be the longest 5 weeks of her poor life. On set, there was a lot of mixing around of lines and stuff. But speaking of Lord of the Rings, like I just started doing the cons this year. Like I've never done them before. And when we did our first con, the hobbits were there. Brian and I went in and took a photo with them, and Brian's holding up an onion ring, and I'm pointing at it, and they're like this. I don't get excited about a lot of stuff, but I love that photo.
One ring to rule them all.
It's funny because there have been fans that have come up to Jeff with the Lord of the Rings box set for him to sign. But here's the touche about it. Before they get to the actual hobbits to sign, so then he would write on the box before them, all they did was fucking walk in this. So then it gets to Elijah Wood, Sean Ashton, Billy Boyd, and Dominic.
There was a guy who came up to my table and he said, you know, I have the VIP pass to get a photo with the hobbits, and it allows me to bring somebody. Would you come with me? So he was holding up a sign that said, even the trees walked in those movies, and I
changed your daily?
It's crazy now. I mean, it's thanks to all of you. Now I get to see everybody on the street. I love that everybody loves the show. So yeah, I love you too.
It's definitely been like the craziest thing. I don't think I was fully expecting. You know, we kind of, the show hit Netflix while the pandemic was still very strong, and so there wasn't really the opportunity to interact with people. This is kind of still very fresh, and I feel like I'm just a little bit toddling around hoping for the best. But you guys have been incredible, so I'm very appreciative.
Jacob, you've done a lot of Nickelodeon, a lot of Disney before you showed up into this universe. How many loved him on his Nickelodeon and Disney shows? Yeah. But how has Hawk been different?
Oh man, well I guess before it was more like kids younger than me who would come up to me and I'd get to talk to, but now it's like my friends' dads. Oh man, I love Hawk when you kick that guy in the face. Yeah, that was awesome. That's most of what my interactions are usually.
Then Solo, you have a big show coming up in just a little bit. We'll talk about that later. But I want to know in the DC universe. But I want to know right now, what did you think coming into the world of Karate Kid?
I had no idea how much this movie meant to people, and I think not like that, but I'm saying we went into the first season with really no expectations aside from that we wanted to make a kick-ass show, and I think we did it 5 times over. And now everyone just asks if we really know how to fight, and the answer is, I guess, kind of. Yeah. What about you guys?
Now the original Karate Kid, right?
Yeah.
I just want to know, people bring this up every time, how many of you think that he was the hero of the original movie? How many of you think he was the villain of the original movie? So you've been on Hot Tub Time Machine, on How I Met Your Mother. I mean, the fandom has loved you and keeps bringing you back. How was it coming back to the world of Cobra Kai?
Well, you guys are here. I mean, you ask how it changed our lives. I mean, it touches you guys. It's kind of changed all our lives. We're kind of a big family. So for us to be up here with you guys, we're sharing this. It's a big party. We're getting to have the fun to learn the karate, fight each other, putting on the show. You guys are showing up. You can't ask for anything better. As an artist, as an actor, to step into this job in this world and to have fans like you guys and to share this with you, it's awesome. When I did Karate Kid, after that I had one fan, that was my mom. And since the show I have a few more, so I'm very grateful.
Now, Thomas here, you're the only one on stage today with a black belt, is that right?
I don't know, these guys are pretty good. They've gotten really good.
Because I don't want it to be a spoiler, so I'm going to ask my question kind of in a code.
Thank you.
There's a scene, though, where they're talking about time spent with celebrities in heaven.
Yes.
Who do you want to meet in heaven? That's the code.
Who would I want to fucking
fucking heaven.
Well, okay.
I told you. I always thought Jesus was pretty hot, you know. I say start at the top, man. Establish dominance, and then you get everybody. Who would I want to have sex with in heaven? And they have to be historical, like people have to know them and shit. I can't be like my grandma's friend, which would be very awkward for my grandma. Let me see. I mean, I don't know. Is this?
Carrie Fisher.
I would legit was going to say Carrie Fisher, but I was thinking is that wrong? Well, you say, but I'm fucking married, man. Like, my wife would be like, I heard you wanted to fuck Carrie Fisher in heaven, you dick. But I loved Carrie when I was a kid. I mean, I loved Carrie as an adult. I got to work with her and hang out with her and shit. She was beautiful. But I loved Carrie Fisher when I was a kid, man. She was my crush. And so I had posters, Star Wars posters, Empire Strikes Back posters, but they were very Carrie Fisher centric, very Princess Leia centric. I had a framed photo that I'd written to her, and I'm a big fan. And they sent me a signed photograph saying "Galactically Yours, Carrie Fisher." I was like, oh my God. And then a month later, I was like, I want another one. I pushed my luck and I sent another letter and I got the exact same photo with the exact same signature. It was like, oh. So I met, when I met Carrie and worked with her on Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, I told her, I was just like, when I was a kid, I had posters of just you exclusively, on my wall, which was weird because I was a young boy, but not that weird because I also had, Star Wars sheets, and I'd hate to tell you what I did with those, And she was like, Christ, I hear this all the time. Why can't you boys keep your cum to yourself? She was so fucking funny, man. It's so dirty as well. She was my kind of person. When we tried to get her into Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, we were offering a scale salary across the board. So everybody that was in the movie that wasn't Jay, all their cameos and shit, they got scale, a minimum wage in the movies or something like that. So we reached out to Carrie about being in the flick, and her agent said she'll be in the movie, but she doesn't want to get paid. She wants the production to buy her this set of antique beaver chairs that she's had her eye on for 6 months. She didn't want the money to be in the movie. She just wanted us to give her these fucking chairs that she wanted to buy. So we bought the fucking chairs. She shows up on the movie on the first day, and I was like, oh my God, I'm a huge fan and shit like that. She was like, thank you. I said, I think it's really kooky that we had to buy you a pair of beaver chairs instead of you just take a salary. What's that all about? And she's like, I thought the idea of me buying beaver chairs for this movie was appropriate. I fucking loved her so much, but Jason had a completely different experience. Jason and I are in the scene with her and shit. But Jason, was just macking on her the whole fucking time. Just constantly, just oh, you know what I would do to you, princess? I'm a little big for a stormtrooper, shit like that. Just going on and on. And, she was tolerating it. She was like, yes, I'm sure you would use your blaster and your lightsaber, all this shit. And then this was going on for about 4 hours into the day. And then we were doing Carrie's coverage, so it's a single, and it's a process trailer, so we're dragging this car. They're both in the car. When I'm in the scene, when it's a 3-shot, Silent Bob is in the car. But since I'm not in the shot, director Kevin Smith is sitting on the process trailer watching the monitor with headphones on. So, like I said, it's all about fucking Carrie's performance and shit. This camera's on her. So we did a take, and then we have to go back to base camp to reset the camera so it's going to be on Jay. And so the whole ride back, the two of them are sitting in the car talking, and I've got headphones on so I can hear the whole fucking thing, and I can see them right in front of me because they're right there in the car. And so Jason does his thing yet again, where he's just like, oh man, you know what I do to you, man? I fucking there's no moon and shit like that. And Carrie out of nowhere, and mind you, she's dressed like a fucking nun, right? Like she is in the movie. Out of nowhere goes, "You better stop saying that shit." And Jay was like fucking thunderstruck, and he was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, did I hurt your feelings? Did I offend you?" And she goes, "No. The problem is young people like you say all these things about how they want to fuck Princess Leia, and you don't follow through." Process trailer with my headphones on, going, "This is the most amazing Star Wars outtake ever." And Jason was cowed. He's like, "I'm really sorry." She goes, "Don't be sorry, just don't do it." And this is my favorite thing she fucking said. She goes, "God, you're just like Affleck." So that meant somewhere in the streams of time, Affleck was like, "There ain't no moon and shit." Like, she went the same fucking thing that she had to put up with Jay. It was adorable. So, I don't know if I'd have sex with her in heaven, but I'd definitely find her out. I'd go seek her out and catch up and be like, "Remember that fucking time you said that shit to Jay?" Then she might be having sex with Jay in heaven, I guess. All right, where are we going next? What's your name, Captain?
What is it? Matt.
Matt, give it up for Matt. Matt.
Fun fact, Jay actually told us the story of him and Carrie frolicking through the field earlier during that same shoot, so that was pretty good to hear the other side.
Fucking A, right on.
But the question I have is, obviously Clerks 3 is wicked emotional, so what was everybody's first reactions to reading the script, expecting the typical Kevin Smith film, let's go tell some dick jokes, to, "Oh fuck, I just got hit in the gut." What was that like?
There were some people that were like, what? I guess there ain't gonna be a Clerks fucking 4. They were, the kids and I grew up together, right? So we've been doing shit together since we were in our 20s and stuff. And, Clerks is me trying to be funny and clever, and all I'm interested in is making you laugh. By the time we get to Clerks 3, I've got 28, 29 years under my belt as a storyteller, and there's some shit I just can't do anymore. Not by virtue of the fact that I can't do it, I'm an old man, but like, with Clerks, I could do shit like, "Hey man, snowballing." And people would be like, "Oh, that's fucking naughty. Where'd you hear that?" And they pass it around and shit. I can't do that anymore because the internet exists. And before I can tell you about a thing, you've already heard about that fucking thing, and there's a subcategory on Pornhub for it. So that fucking sharp, arrow in my quiver, that's gone at this point. Everybody knows that shit and stuff. I mean, think about it. Clerks, one of the most authentic, earnest movies ever made. It's a comedy, don't get me wrong, but fuck, it's dripping with authenticity, because the kid who made that movie was sitting like behind the camera, and he'd turn the camera off, and then he'd walk over to the register and ring somebody up, be like, "Thank you, come again." And then he'd go back to the fucking camera and continue making his movie about ringing people up at the register. He lived that fucking life. Boots on the ground retail, man. That's why like everybody who's ever had a job can identify with that fucking movie and stuff. Yeah. If I were to truly sequelize Clerks today, I wouldn't have made Clerks 3. I wouldn't even made it at all. There's a guy who makes Clerks every fucking day, I think, on TikTok. He's the IKEA guy, got the mustache and shit. Yeah. What's that fucker's name? Fucking brilliant. One of the funniest people I've ever seen in my life, and legit does Clerks better than I did Clerks in 1 minute. I took 93, 1 minute. He gets the fucking point, man. It's fantastic. So if I was going to do it, I would do that, and I wouldn't do it because he's doing that. So I can't give you the boots on the ground retail experience anymore. I don't work in retail. Thanks to Clerks, I haven't worked in retail in fucking 29 years. I own a retail establishment. I've owned Jay and Silent Bob Secret Stash for a quarter century.
You got a theater coming.
So the ethos is completely different, in fucking Clerks, Randall's like, "Man, this job would be great if it weren't for the fucking customers." If I had an employee say, "Hey man, this job would be great if it weren't for the fucking customers," I'd be like, "You're fucking fired." So I can't make Clerks ever again. Like, that time in my life is over, and because we made it, fucking it gave me all of this and shit. And then you get to something like Clerks 2, and I love Clerks 2. It's one of my favorite films I've ever made, but it's complete fucking artifice. It's all made up. Think about it. Clerks is literally my life with everybody's names changed. And sure, nobody fucked a dead guy in the bathroom. I threw that in, making a movie. But generally speaking, the formula for that movie is just take my life and change names. Clerks 2, none of that shit ever happened to me. I never fucking worked in fast food. There was never a threat I was going to move to Florida ever in my fucking life. And I've never, I'm sad to say, been to a donkey show. So all of that is just Dante and Randall fan fiction. That's me going like, I got money, what would they do now? You know what I'm saying? Years later, I get to make a Clerks 3, and then I remember like, well shit, if you're gonna end the way you started. Go back to the original formula. And don't get me wrong, I love Clerks 2, I ain't shitting on it, but it's a movie. Clerks is a film, Clerks 2 is a movie. It's full of movie tropes and, 3 acts and all that shit. Clerks 3 plays more like a film, at least to me, because it's the closest I've gotten to that formula again. I just took my life and changed names and shit. So Randall had my heart attack. Dante and Randall make the movie that I made when I worked at that convenience store, and Dante and Randall still work at that very convenience store that I used to work at. So the whole movie has more authenticity to it than the second one does, because it's still rooted in reality like the first one was. That to me is fucking like the idea of growth, right? Like, I started going, I want to make you laugh, but I can make you laugh still, but it's just like, it's interesting, don't get me wrong, and obviously if you've seen Clerks 3, the first fucking hour and 10 minutes is all about jokes, but the older I get, the more I want to share what I've fucking learned, like at the end of the day. Like it's one thing to be like, here's a fucking funny movie, man, you'll laugh your tits off or something like that. It's another thing to, in the last act of that movie, impart something useful to the audience. Like, give them something that when they leave the place, they're like, holy shit, like maybe I should be trying to do the thing that I wanted to do when I was a kid, because fucking time is running out and stuff like that. So the older one gets, the more you want to share what you've learned. Like, it'd be easy to fucking just throw dirty words into a movie and be like Clerks. But at the end of the day, I had to figure out something a little bit differently if I was going to bring it all home and shit. And the idea of bringing it home in some sort of like trilogy was nuts. Because when we started making the movie, there was no thought of a trilogy. Then the movie made by the kid who made Clerks, Dante gets fucking shot and killed at the end. Clearly, I wasn't thinking about sequels. Thankfully, we cut that ending, though, because I got to make 2 of my favorite movies I ever made, Clerks 2 and Clerks 3. So, yeah, man, it's definitely, when I gave the script to everyone else, there was this, we're all old, we're in our fucking, most of us are in our 50s, but there was this sense of like, because it was funny the first time, we assumed it would just be funny the third time, and yes, it is funny, but like then you snuck something else in the third act. And that to me was like, yeah, we got to do something different if we make the same fucking movie, which is weird because it is about making the same fucking movie. Like, I knew we'd get in trouble anyway. People would be like, his head is so far up his ass, now he's just making a movie about how he made a movie once. But to me, it's not about that. We use Clerks as a framing device because it was my flick and it's cheap and easy to get a hold of and shit. But really, that's just a movie about the joy of fucking outlier art, about somebody outside of a system who's like, I think I could do a thing. And that's been the thing that I've championed my whole fucking life. Not only because I was that, but because to me, everybody in this room is that. Everybody is a content generator in this room. Everybody has a fascinating fucking story to tell. And Randall typifies that. He's just like, I'm someone from nowhere and fucking nobody cares about, but I've got a story to tell and he likes to tell and shit. That's been my favorite, the leitmotif of my entire career. So imparting that in the movie so that a bunch of people go watch that movie and go, oh shit, yeah, there's something I wanted to do. Not necessarily make a flick. Maybe it's knit a blanket. Maybe it's start a business. Maybe it's fucking like, who knows what it is, but we let life get in the way so often of a dream. You're encouraged to dream when you're a child and make pretend and fucking play. And then at a certain point, they're like, grow up, asshole. And all that is supposed to be left behind. And why would you live like that? Oh my God, I saw my father live that way. He worked at the post office his whole fucking life. We were so proud he never went postal and killed anybody.
My dad works at the post office.
But at the end of the day, like fucking like he did the work and never talked about a dream. His whole generation, man. I remember picking his brain once. I said, Dad, what'd you dream about when you were a kid? He's like, what are you talking about? He got sus. Like, why are you asking me this? I was like, well, what did you do? I dreamed about being a movie maker. What did you dream about? And he was like, well, I dreamed about getting married and having kids. And I was like, oh shit, so your dream like came true pretty early and shit. Like, well done. But like for me, it's, I raised my kid differently. I wanted my kid to feel like anything was possible except flight without a jetpack.
We have those now.
But anything else, I'm like, fucking sky's the limit and shit like that. And, you know, they didn't say that to us when we were kids. My father fucking loved me to death, don't get me wrong, but we were not encouraged as a generation. My generation, the 70s and 80s kids and shit. You know, and nowadays I tell my kid, like, fucking, you can do anything. Reach for the fucking stars. My dad was like, see that mountain? Never climb it. Oh my God, you'll fall and hurt yourself. Read about better people who do those things. I was never encouraged to be the better person. My father took me to the movies all the fucking time. Never once said, you could do this. Because that wasn't a part of our fucking world. Now, like, I raised my kid, like, you know, she's 23 now, and I'm all done and shit. She's an adult, and she has her own fucking house. But when she was a fucking kid, she would watch iCarly all the time. Yeah. And great show. And I remember saying to her at one point, I was like, you know, you can watch iCarly or you can write an episode of iCarly. One of them's way more fucking fun. Yeah. And my whole life I've been just throwing that in her direction. You know, not telling her, be a fucking writer and shit, but just like, it's more fun making this shit up. Watching it is cool, don't get me wrong, man. It's great for getting stoned, but like, making this shit is fucking where it's at. And years later, how do I tell the story without telling the story? I got a job working for a toy company, and this isn't Mattel and Masters of the Universe. I did get a job working for a toy company making a cartoon. I got a job working for another toy company, writing a pilot for a live-action version of a very popular 80s cartoon. And this popular 80s cartoon is, I don't look like the guy you would turn to for this cartoon. It's very female-centric. It's not the Powerpuff Girls, but it would be like the Powerpuff Girls. Yeah. If I was like, I'm going to do the Powerpuff Girls, and people are like, no, you're not. We've seen those Jay and Silent Bob movies. Fuck no. So I met with this one toy company, and they pitched me this toy that was famous when I was a kid, and they were like, we want to turn it into a thing. And I was like, I really don't have anything for this. I mean, I loved it when I was a kid, but I don't have anything. What else? What are the properties you guys have you're interested in? They went down a list, and they said this one fucking title, and my eyes lit up, and I was like, are you fucking serious? You guys have that? You want to do something with that? And they're like, why do you know this show? And I was like, I used to watch this fucking show all the time, man. Like, I know I'm not the target audience for it and shit, but like, it was the 80s. We didn't have cable, man. We just watched whatever the fuck was on. It was on. It had a superhero kind of angle to it and shit like that, dual identities. So I was like, I fucking watch this show all the time. And they were like, well, if you're interested in it, you could take it out into the world. We could do it. We could pitch it to Netflix, blah, blah, blah. And they were like, but you probably should have like a female co-writer. And I was like, why? And they were like, because every character's a girl in the fucking show and you're not. And I was like, oh yeah, optics. All right. I was like, let me think. I gotta find me a female writer. And I've worked with a few on Masters of the Universe, like Dia and stuff, so I was thinking of her. But then I was like, wait a second. I've been training a writer my whole life, and she lives downstairs. So I sauntered down to the kids' room when she was still living there. This was about 2 years ago. And I was like, a year and a half ago. And I was like, hey man, remember this cartoon? And we got artwork for this cartoon that's been hanging in our house forever. It came from like a indie art show. Very cool renditions of what the show was. And she's familiar with the show because she used to fucking watch it, you know, when she was a kid. Watch it on YouTube and shit. I was like, you remember that fucking show? She said, yeah. I was like, I think I have a job writing a live action version of it. And she goes, but you're not a girl. And I was like, well, I'm hung like one. Does that count? And she's like, sometimes I hate our open relationship. I was like, listen, man, they're talking to me about bringing on a female co-writer, which makes absolute sense. But I know you're not a writer, you know, by trade yet, but would you want to write this thing with me? And she was just like, let me watch it again. She watched it and she was like, fuck yeah, I'd love to do it. So I hit the people up and shit, and I was like, can I write it with my kid? Does she count as a girl? And they they were like, oh my God, that'd be so cute. And so they had us pitch, like, to Netflix and to fucking Hulu and shit like that. And, like, it was during the pandemic, so it was everyone on Zoom. We weren't in rooms or anything like that. And it's all these motherfuckers, like, just smiling from ear to ear because there was, like, a daddy-daughter pitch going on. I think we got the job for cuteness alone. So we got the job, and so we've been writing together and shit. And, this was the guy who was like, you could watch iCarly, or you could write iCarly. One of them was more fun and stuff. So here we are writing a script together. Now, in this script, there are 2 iterations of characters. Part of it is set in the 80s, and part of it is set in the present. And, naturally, I'll take a shot at the 80s stuff, because I lived in the 80s and whatnot. She'll take the present material, which involves characters that are younger and stuff. So, I fucking go very fast when I'm writing and shit. I'm in the zone. I just go. I was waiting for her pages, and she didn't hand them over and shit. And I was like, who raised this lazy-ass kid? And so one night I texted her. I was like, kiddo, I'm going to take a run at one of the current day scenes with the kids. And she's like, okay, have at it. And so I wrote the scene, and I was very proud of it. I read it out loud. I was like, oh my God, this fucking rocks and shit. So I sent it to the kid, and I was like, here, man, what do you think? And the kid calls me up. She don't even text back. She calls. You know what it takes to get a 20-something to dial a fucking phone? She fucking called. I saw it, and I was like, well, I answered. What's the matter? Are you okay? She goes, Dad, no 20-somethings talk like this. I was like, what are you fucking talking about? I was like, well, not for nothing, but like, I am the king of 20-something dialogue. I mean, I did make Clerks. She goes, Dad, in the 90s. She's like, this doesn't sound like any human being on the planet. It sounds like you pretending to be a 14-year-old girl. And I was like, fucking Diablo Cody won an Oscar for making teenagers talk in a way they fucking don't in that movie. What was it called? Fucking Juno. Yeah. So I was like, it's up to the writer. Writer fucking dictates what the audience will fucking take. And I started getting mouthy with the kid and shit. And she goes, Dad, don't be offended that you can't do the job anymore. And it fucking hurt, man. And then I was like, why did I tell her to fucking just watch iCarly her whole fucking life? But she was right, she took a pass at the fucking dialogue, and I was like, oh, you're right, this sounds fucking better. I did know 20-something dialogue 30 years ago. Now I know fucking dad jokes and shit like that. I've evolved into a place where I need her help. So, you didn't even ask me about that. Why am I talking about my kid?
I'm sorry.
Did you get the answer you're looking for?
I did, yes.
Well done. Give it up for him. He got his answer.